13th, 1977, when sometime after midnight, during the witching hours between 2 and 4 a.m., someone or something crept into the Kiowa unit where they killed and sexually molested the three little girls who were staying there. The perpetrator or perpetrators then carried their small bodies out to a location about 150 yards from the tent. The victims were Michelle Guse, Doris Milner, and Lori Farmer. Hello, for Weird Realities, I'm urban fantasy author Hadley Thorne. On this episode of Wyrd Murders, Mysteries, and Mayhem, we are taking a deep dive into the evidence, news reports, and mystery surrounding the 1977 Girl Scout murders. Now, before we get started, I just want to go ahead and give you a trigger warning. This is a tough subject matter. Tonight, we're going to get into some dark stuff. So, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. We'll be right back. Hey, this is Hadley, and I'm here with Scott Baker. Miss Finley
Howdy.
Jones is going to join us a little bit later, but we're going to go ahead and get started, guys. Happy Thursday.
Yes, yes. Happy Thursday. One more day to go, unless you like me and you work at home. Every day's a work day.
Same. Okay, so what did you think about this topic?
It was interesting, but it was very disturbing because it happened to kids.
Yeah.
You know, I knew nothing about this until this evening when I looked up. I read a couple of articles on it. I watched that 1993 TV special on it. I don't remember the name of it now. It's there's so many aspects of it that are sad and disturbing. The fact that this guy had escaped from jail, what he did to these girls, we'll probably get into more details. And then the fact that when he was caught and all the evidence pointed towards him, because of his nationality, people rallied around him and started hating the family of the kids because all they were seeking was justice for their murdered little girls.
Yeah, that was really disturbing to me. And I couldn't figure out if it was because he had been like a high school football star or sports star, if it was because he had been so popular in his youth, or if it was because the true nature of his prior crimes was never released, or if it was just his nationality. Well, I won't say nationality. Was it race? I
He
mean,
was
he was a
Native
First Nation.
American. Yeah.
Yeah, he was
Yeah. He
First
was Native
Nations.
American. I know that offends some people. I'm sorry. But um, I don't know. You know, it's funny. I think it's the first and the third one because it was ironic. We remember the whole O.J. Simpson trial. I mean, if you were alive in the 1990s and didn't remember the O.J. Simpson trial, you were smoking too much pot. And I remember when they announced they said the verdict was going to be announced. My sister and I were out, and we drove to Best Buy, and we were standing in front of a TV with a older black family, a husband, a wife, and one of the mothers, and three college age students, white kids. And when they announced the not guilty verdict, to my surprise, the three black people looked at each other and went, I can't believe they found him not guilty. But the three white kids were jumping around, fist pumping. Yeah, the Jews got away with it.
Oh man.
So that left an impression on me. I think part of it might have been, yeah, he was a football star. And also back then in the 1970s, that's when the Native American culture was coming back into popularity. They had the old Billy Jack movies on. It was because people were starting to look at what happened to the Native Americans as the tragedy that it was. So I don't know. Maybe there was just an outpouring of, this is just the white man, going after one of our own again.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like I said, it was And one of the main investigators that I had listened to was Harvey Pratt, who also is a Native American, and
Hmm.
him and his brother were both law officers, and they were brought into the case especially to help kind of bridge the culture gap between the white Oklahoma and the native Oklahoma. And
Hmm.
he was very interesting to listen to because he had a lot of the native teachings, but
Yes.
one of the big things that I thought was very interesting was that I can't think of his first name, but Hart, which was he ultimately in the last year has been proven to have been the person who sexually assaulted the Girl
Yeah.
Scouts. So,
Yeah. Well, I think there was no based on, I mean, now granted, it was only an hour and a half documentary plus the few things I read. I mean, it was pretty much the evidence was damning against him. Um, Even if you didn't bring in the fact that he had been in jail for the kidnapping and raping of the two pregnant women. But, the fact that they found the things they found in the cave he was hiding out in matched the materials that he used to bound the little girls before he molested and
mhm.
killed them. The fact that he was wearing a pair of girls eyeglasses that
Well,
probably were stolen from the campsite.
the weird things to me, and this is what I come back to, in there's still to me a lot of unanswered questions, which
Hmm.
ties into when he stole the cord and the duct tape from
Hmm.
the neighboring farm,
Right.
he took 3 crowbars and 3 beers.
Hmm.
And there was a footprint in blood that they found
Hmm.
inside the Girl Scout
Yeah.
cabin that he had tried to clean up.
Hmm.
That was not his size shoe. It was like a 9.5 and he wore an 11. And that was some of the stuff that, like, was there another person? And that to me, that's still a mystery, is we'll probably never know because he died like 2 years after he was acquitted from this crime, but he
Yeah.
was he was in prison for, like, what was 150, 300 years
I think it was
for
like
the
800 years, if I
yeah,
remember.
it was a lot, due
And
to the what was it? The escape and the rape and attempted murder of the
he got, I
pregnant
think,
ladies.
805 years for the rape, the kidnapping and the raping of those two women.
But he escaped like 3 times too. He
Yeah, he
escaped
is.
once and was caught, and then he escaped another time, maybe
Yeah,
twice.
and then he escaped the third time, and which makes you wonder. I mean, were, how were they not sticking him into the right prison? Was the prison really that bad that you could escape 3 times?
Well, that goes into the mysticism thing.
Mm.
He said he was a shapeshifter. He said that he was a skinwalker. And I mean, that's black magic with Native
Yeah.
Americans. And, that was something that really, they don't even talk about that. And they really don't talk about it with whites.
Hmm.
So he used that as a way to kind of control what people thought. Because, I mean, if you talk to anyone that's got any ties to the Native community, they do not take that with a grain of salt. I mean, they take that very serious.
No, it's a very spiritual. It's very spiritual to them, like Wickedism or Christianity or anything like that. Yeah.
Well, did you by chance listen there's Finley. Hey Finley.
Hey.
Hi, Finley.
Hi.
We're just getting into talking about the kind of Native American mysticism surrounding um and I can't think of it. I know it's like Leroy Hart. Is that it?
Leroy Hart, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Leroy.
talking the murderer.
Yes. That well, I was
Yeah,
gonna
it
say,
was, it
like,
was Gene Leroy Hart.
yeah, Gene Leroy Hart. And he he just had, like I said, some bad juju going on. But there was a lot of there was some really strange things that I heard in one of the material that I found on the topic was talking about how there's all this happens around the same time in June. And he even died around the same time in June.
Yep.
And so there's a lot. And the guy that I was listening to was like, I wonder if there's any Native American, what their myths are around that time, or if there's any tie-in with anything. But it was really interesting. Like I said, the curse that when they did finally capture him, they captured him at a medicine man's home. The medicine man put a curse on the dogs. All the dogs ended up dying.
I know. That was... hi, Laura.
Hey, Laura.
I know. That was... There's a lot about that stuff that just made me wonder. The fact that the medicine man said, "Oh, there's a curse on these dogs; they're going to die." Somebody put a curse on them, and then both dogs died within a couple of days of each other while on the manhunt.
Yep. And there was another time when Harvey Pratt had a medicine man that him and his brother knew that gave him something to burn when he was saging himself.
Yeah.
And he said that they had gone somewhere and he had gotten some sage, and he had gone out and was saging himself and had gotten the tobacco, and that a lot of the white officers came over and go, "Can you sage me too?" And he took that packet that the Native American had given him, the medicine man that he knew, and he said, "This will help you get some answers." And he burned it. And when he did, within 5 minutes, the phone rang, and it was someone who recognized the women from the cave photos.
Yes.
So there's a lot of mystical things that were going on in this.
The one that I loved about the mystical part was when they did the ceremony where I believe it was the prosecutor stood over a piece of, he stood on a piece of material that had the girl's blood and said, Jean Hart is guilty, and somebody else stood on it and said that Jean Hart was innocent and that the person who was lying would die. And shortly afterwards, they found Jean Hart. They acquitted him. He went back to jail, and during his workout on the exercise yacht, he died of a massive coronary.
Mm-hmm. So Finley, what did you think about this?
I mean, I didn't see that. I haven't read that, so this is the first I'm hearing about it.
Yeah, it had a lot of that was one of the reasons I really wanted to tackle this, is once you start getting into the story of the trial and the hunt, and even the he's been proven to be, at least part of the people who did this horrible crime. But Hart there's a lot of really weird, dark stuff. And this doesn't even touch on the actual crimes, which we haven't really gotten into yet. Yeah. Scott, would you like to do a breakdown on the evidence in the crime timeline?
Sure. It was the 1970s when people weren't as paranoid as they are today. And it was a camp. There was large Camp Scott. No, that's why I thought you brought me on. And these 3 young girls. There should have been 4, but one of them, they screwed up her assignment, and she got somewhere else. These 3 young girls, and I think we need to just mention that. Let me see if I had their names written somewhere. There was Laurie Lee Farmer, who was 8 years old. Doris Denise Milner, who was 10, and Michelle Heather Guse, who was 9. And they had this tent set up at the far end. Camp Scott was divided into areas for different groups. Each group had its own Native American name. It just so happened that their group was at the far end of the campground. And these 3 girls were at the tent at the farthest end of the group. So literally, they were the farthest away from anyone else. And one of the camp counselors, she woke up one night and she was looking out and she saw a dim light in the woods. So she flashed her flashlight and it went off. And she heard nothing. So she went back to doing her stuff. And I cannot remember if it was the same woman, the same counselor, or somebody else. And the 3 girls had written notes that day because they were stuck inside because it was raining. So they all wrote notes. One of them was like, please come and get me. I can't put up with this for 2 weeks. The other one was talking about how she made some good friends. And the night passed. And when one of the counselors was going the next morning, 6 a.m., she was going to the showers. And as she was passing near where the girls' tent was, she found a sleeping bag outside. And when she went over to investigate, the sleeping bag had been covering one of the girls who had been murdered. So she immediately called the police. The police came down, and what the police had found was that the 3 girls had been bound up. All 3 had been sexually assaulted, and then all 3 were murdered. And then they started looking at the investigation. They knew that 2 of the girls probably were murdered in the tent because there was blood splatter all over the tent. And whoever had committed the crime, turns out later it was Jean Hart, had tried to wipe it down. Not even erase it, just like smudge it and get rid of it. And they eventually found out, that the girls had been, like I said, sexually assaulted and then murdered. But because this campground was in Cherokee territory, it fell under the jurisdiction of the local tribal police, not the Oklahoma police. So,
and I have shared a screen. I don't know if anybody can see it. Scott, can you see it? It's the
I
camp
can see it.
layout.
I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that might help.
Yeah.
So,
but it was the subsequent investigation. Whoever had been there had left, or there was the tape. The girls had been bound with tape and with nylon rope, and somebody had left a flashlight there. Whoever had done it had left their flashlight, but they had wiped it of fingerprints. And it was a very long, very complicated investigation. They were being quiet about it, and they weren't talking to the public, but they also weren't passing a lot of information to the parents because they had no information to pass to the parents.
And I've got some pictures. This is the actual sleeping bags they found.
So what they eventually found was that not far from where this last tent was this cave overlooking Camp Scott. And somebody had discovered things in there, called the police, and the police had found out that what they found was the same type of tape and the same type of nylon rope that had been used to bound and gag the young girls. They found other evidence. I think they found a similar flashlight, and they found a picture of a photograph taken of 2 women. They had no clue who these women were. So what they did was they put it in the newspapers, and they were like, if you know who these women are, please contact us. And as Hadley was saying earlier, when they did the saging and when they used like the tribal rituals to help put them on the right track, it was like within 5 minutes after that somebody called the tribal police office and said, oh, I know who those 2 women are. It turned out that Gene Hart, while he was in prison for the kidnapping and raping of the 2 women, was also a photographer. And he had been taking pictures, and he had taken this picture, I think it was a wedding party. He had taken the pictures of the women. So when they recognized who the women were, it was easy to track them down, find out who took the photographs. They now were pretty sure it was Gene Hart. Gene had a little earlier had escaped from prison. As Hadley said, this was his third time breaking out. So they went looking for Gene. Gene disappeared, and he wound up going to the home of a local medicine man and asking for asylum. As is the case with the Native Americans, they don't look at you as, did you do something bad? Did you do something good? You are one of the tribe. We will help you. So they put him up in a cabin, and the police eventually knew. They felt he was in this cabin, and they kept on trying to get to him. And every time they did, the medicine man would like, nope, this is my property. You're not allowed on it. The local police couldn't do anything because it was tribal police. So the tribal police finally got fed up, and they went and they told the medicine man wasn't there that day. His wife was. And they told her, we know Gene Hart's there. We are pretty certain Gene Hart is the murderer and the molester. We want you to let us in and get him. If you don't, we are going to publish your name, your husband's name, your address, and say, yeah, this is where we think Gene Hart is, and we won't come to protect you. So she smartly agreed. They raided the cabin and they captured Gene Hart, and they brought him into custody. And what was very surprising to them at the time was he became an overnight celebrity. I mean, he almost became as popular as Charles Manson.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
he got tribal lawyers to come and talk. He went on television. He gave news reports, interviews. And there was a very large community that was supporting him, that were making the claims he was innocent, and that it was the I hate to say it this way, but it was the white man, trying to pin this on a Native American. And the problem was the prosecution cannot ask for a change of venue. They can't say, we don't think he's going to get a fair trial here. Only the defense can ask that. And the defense did not ask that because they knew they were in the ideal place, the ideal position to possibly win this trial. So the trial went to trial. All the evidence was presented. It was overwhelming. There were questions about the DNA, but it wasn't questions that like, well, it may not have been him. They couldn't 100% prove it was or wasn't him, but it was directed, and it looked very damning. They weren't allowed to introduce the fact that he was in jail previously for kidnapping and raping 2 women. And when it came in as an acquittal, and he was released. But because he still had to serve 803 years of his 805-year sentence, he wound up going back to jail anyways to finish off his time for the first crime.
Yeah, it was really, really a weird case. One of the things that, going back to the mystical side of things, y'all know that's what's so weird to me, is when they were dropping off the little girls, the parents were there, and they were getting on the buses and all. Is it Diane? Was that the little girl's name?
Doris Denise.
Doris Denise. She was her little sister was 5 years old, and when she left, she looked up at her mother because the sister did not want to go. She had decided she did not want to go to camp. The little sister looked up at the mom and she goes, "What happens when people die?"
Oh yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And the mom, made some parental comment, and she goes, "Well, what if everybody dies?" And the following day, her sister dies, or after midnight that night. So it was really weird, but there's just all kinds of stuff with it. I watched a cold case investigation on this, and it was done a couple of years ago. Like I said, this they have come back and they retested the DNA this year. I think they got some semen off of one of the girls' clothes, and it was a match for Hart. The thing about that, which was interesting, is that Hart had a vasectomy. And so
Mhm.
that was one of the ways that they were, and that's why I'm getting off on an acquittal was very interesting to me is despite the fact he had a vasectomy, he was still able to perform, and the semen or the lack of semen that they found on the scene, it did not have sperm in it, which would be consistent with the vasectomy. So that was one of the odd things with it.
I thought
Another
I'm sorry, I don't mean to. I thought they found sperm in the semen, which was one of the things the defense used. Oh, well, he had the vasectomy. It couldn't have been him. But it was during the autopsy after his heart attack that they found that the vasectomy had failed.
Oh, maybe you're right. I could be wrong. This is
Yeah.
old. I watched some stuff that was like from the 70s and stuff that was from the 90s, and then I watched some stuff
Yeah.
that was current.
Hmm.
But it was like I said, it was all very interesting, but it was very damning for him. There was some things that, again, made me think there might have been more than one person. Um, the the weird state they found the bodies is one of those weird things because the assault took place in the tent. The
Right.
tent had been selected prior. They believe it had been premeditated because the tent had been cut um prior to that night.
Oh.
So and there was some weird stuff that was going on like in as far back as April of 77 at the campgrounds. Like they were, people's glasses were missing and
Yeah.
things like that. There were some notes that were left. I think they were later kind of tossed out because some girls had said that it was them, but someone had left a note that said that we're going to kill 3 girls in cabin 1 or tent 1. And the tent the girls in was actually tent 7. In some of the material, it's referred to as tent 8, but that's just like whether or not you count the counselor's cabin,
Hmm.
which wasn't considered 1 through 7. But I was thinking to myself, again, just my paranoid brain, but if someone did not know they were numbered 1 through 7, that would be the first tent going into the campground from
Right.
that area.
Right.
And then the counselor's tent would have been number 8.
Hmm.
So, that was one of the things. The blood splatter and everything like that indicated that probably I think the youngest little girl was probably killed on impact. This and I saw some conflicting stories. The cold case that I saw on this indicated that only 2 of the girls had been sexually assaulted, but I saw like in the 70s they were saying that all 3 of them had been. So I don't know which one was true or not because I couldn't find like the actual police case. Um, so that was some of the interesting things about it. I mean, it's horrible, but was one
Well,
of the
what?
girls not okay? I'm going to go back to the 3 crowbars,
Hmm.
3 crowbars, 3 beers, 3 girls. That's weird.
Hmm.
Um, you would think there would be multiple, I guess, perpetrators. Um, in the case, one of the other things that I saw was like the premeditation of it versus the way that they found Denise's body was very much one of like just of something that had just what did they gotta call it? Not it's like the opposite of premeditation, but just it's like a in the moment kind of kill. She was found spread eagle on top of the sleeping bag
Hmm.
in the middle of the trail. And that's strange to me, not being a professional crime person, probably like Finley and Scott, but I thought it was odd. And the fact that the other two little girls were found not just in the sleeping bag, but pushed way down in the bottom of it, like it would be easier probably to carry them that way. But I know, like, one of the investigators had made the comment that he thought it was just like clothes or something, and it was just devastating to see that it was those little girls.
Well, I remember reading the account, and I do not remember if it was one of the police officers, if it was the forensics officer, or if it was the autopsy about, and this, if you don't want to hear something very disturbing, hit mute for a minute, that one of the little girls had her underwear twisted and yanked to the side. And that's what he knew even before he did a further investigation, that at least the one of them had been sexually assaulted. One thing that ate away at me, if I can see him coming in, killing, maybe incapacitating two of the girls so they don't go running and screaming, and then overpowering the third one. But if he killed them at the beginning and only left one girl alive, but all three were sexually molested.
Well, see, that's what the inconsistency that I found was that the youngest child was not. But then, and I think I saw that same interview with the gentleman talking about the autopsy, that that he thought she had been untouched, but then when he saw her underwear, he knew differently.
Yeah.
Um, Now, the other thing about, was it Doris? Diane? Doris?
Doris.
She was the only African American child at the camp that summer.
Yeah.
And so they had wondered if that had something to do with it. But she was not bludgeoned. The other two little girls were bludgeoned in the tent. They think that the initial blow probably had, I think, just probably killed the first baby contact. And the second one had been hit, but then she was, I think, the one that was sodomized. And the other little girl, Doris, was vaginally raped.
Oh.
And so it's tragic. But again, the first two were pushed down into the sleeping bag, and Doris was assaulted, I'm guessing, out in the middle of the woods. One of the things that had been storming that night, but people complained about hearing a noise. That they heard something that it didn't even sound like an animal. It sounded like it didn't sound human. It didn't sound like an animal. It just was this horrible, crazy sound. And others said they saw multiple lights. He did have a flashlight. He had a doctored flashlight, which he was a repeat offender burglar. And the flashlight that he had been doctored to create a very small flashlight hole, so he could see probably to get into the tent. But it's just horrific what happened. And I think, was it the squirrel hunters that found the cave? But one of the things, and I don't know if you found this, but I heard mention of 3 caves, but I only heard details about 2.
Oh, I had never heard of the other 2 caves. I only heard about the one that he was in that overlooked the campground.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Well, they found his, I guess, like, lair, which was the one with all the stuff. But then they found another one that said, "I am the killer. You'll never catch me." That kind of thing. That was written in, paint or blood or whatever. In the second one. But like I said, I heard mention of a third, but it was never, they never really got to it. Maybe I didn't go far enough. But this all ties into some of the mysticism stuff of it. To me, it's some of the spooky, ooky stuff.
Well, one thing, I'm sorry, go ahead, Finley.
No, I would just Finley, what do you got? I know that I've just been running my mouth.
No, I'm listening. You always seem to find things that I don't find. Um, I did send an article to Hadley yesterday or day before about Kristen Chenoweth. I don't know if you saw that, Scott, but
No.
she was supposed to be at that camp and she got sick and
Oh,
her mom wouldn't let her go.
oh. Well, I remember reading an interview, not reading, but they did a video interview with one of the mothers, and she's still living with the fact that she made her daughter go camping. Her daughter didn't want to go to the Girl Scouts. She wanted to go to a YMCA camp, a YWCA camp. And her mother not only picked going to Camp Scott, she picked the dates for her to go.
Mm.
So the mother's, in the interview said that is something she'll always live with.
Well, these were not my kids, but as a mom, it is just, I cannot imagine what she goes through
No,
thinking about that. But there's no way she could have ever imagined
no.
that would have happened to
No.
her child. There's just
Well, at
no
this time, there was, I mean, it wasn't the 80s, which was, when we grew up, Finley, when, there was a lot more paranoia about, lock your doors.
right.
Um,
Stranger
you know,
danger.
yeah, in the 70s, I mean, that's what one of the quotes that I saw was, this is where we send our kids to get away from that. People
Yeah.
never assumed that this sort of thing could happen because I think somebody was saying, they were just teenagers. They were scared to go out and check the cabins too. Who left teenagers in charge? I was like, didn't y'all see what was it? Friday the 13th. Come on.
Right.
Well, what's really sad is, I mean, we know this stuff happened a lot in the 70s. The Mansons, there were others. It wasn't until the 80s that we started getting paranoid about it. And I mean, and I'm not blaming it. I'm not blaming the culture, but also the 1970s was the start of those really bizarre, scary revenge movies. I Spit in Your Grave, Last House on the Left, where it was, a bunch of nut jobs, rape, murder, a couple of innocent young girls, and either the girls or the girls' family come back and kill them. But yeah, I grew up in the 70s and I don't remember any of that. I was just a young kid. One thing that I did notice though about this is, and I'm not a psychologist, but every crime he committed that we know of involved children. He kidnapped and raped 2 pregnant mothers. Then he goes off and molests and kills 3 young women.
Well, I thought that was interesting too, but what I found was that the pregnant women, they were like 17 and 18, or
Oh,
like 18 and 19, and that both of them were like maybe 3 months along, so they weren't showing yet.
no.
But like he had taken off one of their glasses. It was
Mhm,
like trying on the glasses because that was his thing.
mhm.
But he had buried them and left them for dead.
Yeah,
And
sorry.
the girl was able to get her hands unbound
Mhm,
and they were able to escape, but he had buried them alive. I
yeah.
mean, he's a bad dude,
Oh, yeah, he is.
or
And
was.
yet he had, like Manson, he had a huge following in the community of people who thought he was great. The difference being Hart's people thought he was innocent, whereas Manson's followers knew he was guilty, but like worshiped him for it.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind.
Well, I found this to be, I had never heard about this, and my friend Lauren Smith had done a podcast on it, and I'd listened to it, and I'd probably listened to it. They did a two-parter because this was before it was solved. Like I said, it was recently solved, but was they did one whole part just about the crime and then one whole part all about the occult aspects of it because there were so many.
Mhm.
And I'd never heard of it. So
No.
I thought that was really interesting. The place is still there today. They never went back. And so when I was on YouTube, I found like some people had broken in and gone in and videoed it, and it really is just like it has toys everywhere, like people just left.
Wow.
But they sent the campers home and they never told them what happened. So the
No.
parents, don't really know what happened. And one of the gosh, I want to say because there was the little blonde girl and I think it was the brunette little girl. I think it was her family. The police came to their house and told them that something had happened at camp, but they did not know that their child had been assaulted until they saw it on the news.
Yes. Yeah.
That was terrible. To find out something like that way. But it was, like I said, it was a really hard case to unpack. The before and after, the fact that there were things going on at the camp for 2 months before they had the campers, that there was a warning, you know, whether that's
Yeah.
real or
Somebody
not.
had stolen donuts from the counselor's quarters.
Mhm.
Mm.
And glasses, all the glasses. But, so there was stuff going on, and then that night, somebody reported hearing, and it was one of the counselors had gone out, and they think it was probably Doris's last cries for her mother, but she heard
Wow.
someone yell, "Mama, mama," and then silence,
Mm.
and she just went back into her cabin. Because she thought somebody was having a bad dream, but she didn't go. I mean, if I
Mm.
was 16 or 17, I'd probably been, not going to look either. I'd probably been too
Yeah.
scared. But it had been a horrible thunderstorm. So you have a thunderstorm with these teenagers. Um, oh no, Sylvester Barzy. That's crazy.
Hmm?
Sylvester just
Oh,
posted
I
that
see.
his friend's mother was friends with one of the little girls that was murdered. It's crazy. It was very crazy. We've been talking about how crazy.
Now, Sylvester, was the friend's mother at the campground that night in another camp, in another tent where she was safe? Or did she just know her outside of the camping?
Dum, dum, dum. So wait for Sylvester.
Yeah.
Type faster. But no, that is crazy.
What
What
really
was
gets
was even oh sorry. What I was gonna say is what's really crazy is that there was a fourth girl that was supposed to be put into that cabin that night. And for some
uh,
reason, probably because of the storm, she was not moved. Oh, I bet this was the little sister that had asked about the murdered people. 'Cause I think that
Mm-mm-mm.
maybe.
was Doris's sister. Was it Doris? And I can't think of her little sister's name.
No, I can't off the top of my head. What fascinates me about it was, um, when you read the news articles, when you go on the Wikipedia, things like that, it talks about the facts of the case. But, and it was you referred me to it, Hatley, the 1993 documentary, Someone Cry for the Children, the Girl Scout Murders. That was the only thing I saw that really delved into how the tribal police channeled the spirit world to try to help them solve them, help them track down the murderer, help them bring him to justice, and all of the weird aspects. They never would have found out that Gene Hart was living at that Medicine's Man house if they hadn't used
Mhm.
the tribal spirits.
Well, they said that's why they brought Harvey Pratt in, and I was familiar with Harvey Pratt. And this is just into my own little world, guys. Harvey Pratt did some books with David Pilates on the Hanoba missing 411 type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and he is a sketch artist for police, and he's phenomenal. But he also does sketch artists for people who've seen Bigfoot. So that's kind of where I knew his name from.
Ah,
But he was who got brought into this, and he's a fascinating gentleman. And to hear him talk, because he is giving accounts of like working with sage and stuff like that, and he said that like I said, it's fascinating. And is the 93 documentary, was that the one that Johnny Cash had?
yes, yes.
Yeah,
That was the one.
that's
Johnny
a
Cash did all of the talking for the tribal community and about the little girls.
okay. That was a very good one.
That was
Um,
excellent. Yeah.
just like listen to Johnny Cash's voice though.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so that was
I
a
am
really
really surprised no one has ever thought of making that into a movie.
you would think that would be a big one or something similar. Hey, Mark Eady.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Well, it had so many elements that it could definitely make it noteworthy. I mean, to me, when we talk about things that inspire the creepy things we think of, this is a definite case that does. Because the unhuman howl or whatever sound that was coming forth from Leroy Hart when he was out in the woods doing what he was
Mhm.
doing to those girls. And then to say that he was a skinwalker, that's very, very, just very crazy. Yeah, I believe you're
Yeah.
right. Sylvester just said it's dark. I don't think we see too many true crime movies about child murders.
Yeah. One thing I did not find, now, of course, I didn't have a lot of time to research it, was I never saw any video interviews of Gene Hart. I would like to have watched one of those to see what he was like. Did he come across as batshit crazy like Manson and his followers? Or did he come across more like a Hannibal Lecter type?
I don't know because I didn't see anything with him talking, but I did see
Mhm.
some footage of him like moving around. And this is crazy. He made me think of a tennis player. I don't know if it was the haircut, or
Oh yeah,
what.
when he was first captured, first
Yeah,
arrested. Yeah.
but but it was weird that he legitimately liked to wear ladies' glasses. And one of the things that they were talking about was that, he's probably very poor and he couldn't, that was probably where the thing with the glasses came from, was that he couldn't afford his own. So he was just
Mhm.
looking for a prescription close enough for him to watch. I mean, to look through. But it's very dark.
I just wonder, this was a long time ago, but all those people that believed in his innocence that are still alive, I wonder now that they're claiming that the DNA evidence is proving he's the one, or at least they're alluding to it proving to he's the one that actually committed the crime. I just wonder if they still feel as strongly.
Personally, I think anybody that had seen the evidence, and it was not included in the original trial, was about those two rapes and attempted murders of those pregnant
Mhm.
ladies, because it was very similar in a lot
Yeah.
of ways and to what happened to the Girl Scouts. So I don't think you could have ignored that if you'd known about it, but they did not let them admit it. Um, they to the for I can't remember what the reason was, but they wouldn't let them admit it into the court case.
Well, I mean, that's just it. We see trials now, and we think there's no way he can't be innocent or she can't be innocent, but we don't see all the evidence. The jury sees
No.
what they see. We don't. But
Mhm.
so the people that were thinking that Hart was innocent, I just don't. I guess we just know so much more now than they did then. But
Well, from what I read, and again, I didn't do a really deep dive research into this. A lot of the people who supported Hart were of the mindset that they're trying to pin this on the Native American guy. Here's a murderer, here's a guy broke out, he's hiding in the woods. Yeah, let's just blame him rather than, hunted down in case it might be a white guy. A
Right.
lot like the O.J. Simpson trial. There were a lot of people who supported him because he was a football player.
He was OJ.
He was the juice. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't think that they may very well today still think, yeah, well, all the evidence came from, white guys, so
Yeah.
they might still think that way. I mean, look at the mindset we have today. So many things, evidence is overlooked because, I know that's it. But I think that person is of this political persuasion, so therefore that person must be guilty.
Well, it sure was interesting to see how far that the DNA evidence, or how much we can do now has changed. Because I think originally they could tell like it was a native. It was like 0.009% sure that it was a Native American with a certain type of hair, and he was typo negative, and it was like, well, that just discounts how many people. But now they can tell who it was and stuff like that. So it's just amazing the changes that we've had. But
well, ironically, I was watching an interview one night with a prosecutor who said, yes, we've got great, we've come a long way, but he was complaining about shows like NCIS because in those shows, they can pick out exactly who did it because of the DNA evidence and the hair and, the curl on the bottom of the shoe was only purchased by so-and-so, it was only sold in the New York store. And he said that people are getting off because they can't prove it to that level. The evidence is overwhelming that the person is guilty, but because it's not NCIS overwhelming, a lot of jurors let them go.
Well, Sylvester is saying, I think so many cases are going to get cracked from DNA now after the Golden State Killer is just open season on Unsolved Murderers.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so. I love to get the cold case guys and to see what all they come up with. So I'm interested to see what all happens. There's a ton of unsolved murders out there. I wonder how many are going to be linked to like Bundy and people like that we just don't know about yet. Because that was the other thing about Hart was, he escaped from prison like years before any of this Girl Scout stuff happened.
Yeah.
And so he had been, just out there, no telling what he was doing because he was still robbing people. He was still he had to get by somehow. But well, anyway, guys, that's going to do it for Wyrd Murders, Mysteries, and Mayhem for this week. We will see you same time, same bat channel next week. Until then, stay weird.
Ciao.
Bye, everybody.